Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Thucydides Peloponnesian War. We're now entering the ninth year of, well, first of all, let me repeat, we're using the landmark Thucydides. The translation we're doing is not in Greek. I'm going to have to apologize. The words are going to be, I'm going to make kind of some slaughtering some of the names. The names are, difficult. We're using landmarks to say these Israel Peloponnesian War. Laura, we're using the Google Books version, which kind of sucks in that sense. I'll be honest with you guys. I wish we used if in a classroom. It'd be more fun to use this because of the maps and the things and the side arcs. I actually would not even use this translation if we're doing a more accurate translation, but it's the one. It's the best one that's available for the purpose of this. And I'm not going to do Greek. I'm not going to sit here and do Greek with you guys because that's just tormenting everyone. And we'd never get through it. We'd be doing a chapter, a section, a class, and that's kind of a little tedious. And this is not a Greek class. Most of you coming here because of political theory, ideas, maybe statesmen, international relations, interesting you. This is what we're going to be dealing with. So today we're going to be going on the ninth year of the war, starting with the summer. Okay, and we're still in book 4. We're going to be looking at chapters 116 through um, the 116 through 133, I think. So let's go start with 116. Yeah, starting with 117. Um, in the spring of the summer followed, the Spartans and the Athenians made an armistice for a year. The Athenians thought that they would gain time to make preparations before Bredius could procure the revolt of more of their cities, and that they might also, if suited them, conclude a general peace. The Spartans suspected the actual fear of the Athenians, and thinking that they had once enjoyed a respite from trouble and misery, they would be more disposed to consent to reconciliation and give back the prisoners and make a treaty for a longer period. The more important thing for the Spartans was to get back their men while Bria's good fortune lasted. Further successes might make the struggle a less unequal one on Claudius, but would leave them still deprived of their men, and 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 even in Calydny, not more than a match for the Athenians, and by no means of certain victory. The armistice was accordingly concluded by Sparta and her allies on the following terms. And now to talk about this now. This is the um, as for the temples and oracles of the Pythian or Apollo, we are agreed to whoever so wishes to have access to it without force or fear, according to the usages of his forefathers. 2. The Spartans and the allies present agreed to this, and promised to send heralds to the Boeotians and Boeotians to do their best to persuade them to agree likewise. As to the treasure of the gods, we agreed to exert ourselves to detect all wrongdoers, truly and honestly following the custom of our forefathers, as we and you and all others willing to do, following the customs of our forefathers. As to these points, the Spartans and the other allies all agreed, as been said. As to what follows, the Spartans and the other allies agreed if the Athenians conclude a treaty to remain each of us in our territory, retain our respected acquisitions, the garrison in Coryphacium, keeping within the Budapest and Tomos and the Korea, attempting no communications with the Peloponnesian Confederacy, neither we with them nor they with us, and that Nicaris and Minosa not crossing the road leading from the gates to the temple of Nicaris, so that of Poseidon, and from there straight to the bridge at Minoa, and the Megarians and the rest of the allies equally bound not to cross this road. the Athenians regaining the island that they have taken without any communication on either side to the Thracian, each side retaining what it has, and was arranged with the Athenians. As to the use of the sea, so far as refers to their own coasts, and so to their confederacy, the Spartans and their allies may voyage upon it in any vessel rowed by oars, and not more than 500 talents tonnage, not a vessel of war. All the heralds and embassies, with as many attendants as they please for concluding the war and adjusting claims, shall have free passage going and coming to the Peloponnesian Athens by land and sea. That during the truce, deserters, whether slave or free, shall be received neither by us or you or by us. Further, sanctification. Further, that satisfaction shall be given to you, to us, and to us to you, according to public law of our several cities, and having disputed all settled by law without recourse to hostilities. The Athenians and allies agreed to these articles, but you have anything more fair or just to suggest, come to Sparta and let us know whether shall be just and meet with no objections either from the Spartans or the allies. Only let those who come with full powers, and bid us as you bid us to come, and the truce shall be for 1 year, approved by the people. The tribe of Achaemenius had the Petrea, and the Pepius was secretary, Nicadius chairman, Laches moved in the name of the good fortune of named in the name of the good fortune of the Athenians, had concluded the armistice upon terms made upon by the Spartans and the allies. It was agreed according to the popular assembly, and the assembly should be for 1 year, beginning at the very day in 14 months of Epibolon, during which the time ambassadors and herald could go and come between the two countries uh, to discuss the basis of peace. The generals and the praetors should call to an assembly of the people, in which the Athenians should first consult on the peace and on the mode in which the embassy it is first putting the end to the war should be admitted, and that embassy now present should at once pledge an oath before the people to keep well and truly this truce for 1 year. Okay, now this ends that paragraph. This is probably 19. I think this is now 20. Um, on these terms, the Spartans concluded a truce with the Athenians and their allies on the 12th day of the Spartan month of Crastus, and the allies also taking the oaths. Those who concluded and poured the libations were Tartus, Tau, Tauros, son of uh, um, Echemetes, Athenios, son of Pericleides, Pericleides, and Philocardes, son of, oh God, Hierolex de Lades, the Spartans, Aeneas, son of Aeneas and son of Aeneas, and Euphramedes, son of Aristomenos. The Corinthians, Damoninum, Damontimus, son of Nucrates, and Onisim, son of Megacles. Cyclonians, Nicias, son of Clay, Calchas, and M- M- Menakritos, son of Amphipodoros, and the Megarians, and Amphias, son of uh, Eupedius, and Epid, Epidoranian, and the Athenian generals Nicodorus, son of Diothepilus, Nicias, son of Nic, Ni, Ni, Nice, Niceratos, and Autoclus, son of Tomachius. Such was the armistice, and during the whole of it, conferences were held on the subject of a full peace. In the days in which they were going back and forward in these conferences, Siones, in a city of Pellene, is revolted from Athens. They went over to Brasius. The Siones say that they were Pallenians from the Peloponnesus, and that their first founders settled the place when they were carried to it by storms, which caught the Archaeans on the return voyage from the Troy. The Sinocracians no sooner revolted than Brasias crossed over by night to Sion with a friendly triman ahead and himself in a small boat some ways behind. The ideas of being that if it fell in with a few vessels larger than boats, he would have the triman to defend him, while a ship that is a match for a triman could probably neglect the small vessel to attack the large one, and thus leave him time to escape. When he completed the crossing, he called a meeting of the Neans, and spoke to them in effect as at Antikratos and Ton, adding that they merited the utmost commendations, and that, in spite of their insular position, they located as they were on Pallene, the isthmus cut off from the mainland by the Athenian occupation of Padea. They had their own free will, and had of their own free will gone over to gain their liberty instead of timorously waiting until they had been by force compelled to accept their own manifest good. This was a sign that they would valiantly undergo any trial, however great, and if he were to order affairs as he intended, he would count them among the truest and securest friends of the Spartans, and would in every way honor them. The Sionians were elated by his language, and when even those who at first disapproved of what had been done caught the general confidence, they decided on a vigorous conduct of war. They welcomed Brasidas with all possible honors, publicly crowning him with a wreath of gold as liberated the Hellenes. Private persons crowded around him and decked him with garlands as though he had been an athlete. Meanwhile, Brasidas left them in a small garrison for the present and crossed back again. Not long afterwards, sent over a larger force, intending, with the help of the Sicilian, to attempt Mendi and Patadia before the Athenians could arrive. Sion, he felt, was too like an island for them not to attempt to relieve it. Indeed, with regard to these cities, he was actively seeking their betrayal. In the midst of his designs, some of the cities in question, a train arrived with commissioners carrying around the news of the armistice. Oresodamos for the Athenians, and Athenidanus Euthydemus for the Spartans. This is interesting. Um, the names changed. It was Athens, the Athens guy for the Spartans. Uh, Euthydemus for the Spartans. The troops were now crossed back to Turin, and the commissioners gave Bratius notice of a truce. All the Spartan allies in Thrace accepted what had been done, and Aristodemus made no difficulty about the rest. But finding on counting the days that the Scythians had revolted after the date of the convention, refused to include them in it. To this, Bratius earnestly objected, asserting that the revolt took place before and would not give up the city. When Aristodemus reported the case to Athens, and the people at once prepared to send an expedition to Cinna. Upon this, envoys arrived from Sparta, alleging that this would be the breach of the truce, and laid claim to the city, trusting the word of Bratius, at the same time offering to submit the question to arbitration. Arbitration, however, was what the Athenians did not choose to risk. They were determined to send troops at once to the place, furious at the idea of even the islanders now daring to revolt in vain reliance on the powers of the Spartans by land. Besides the fact of the revolt, were rather, as the Athenians contended, the Thessalians having revolted 2 days after the convention. Cleon accordingly succeeded in carrying the decree to reduce and put to death the Sicilians, and the Athenians employed at leisure, which were now enjoyed in preparing for their expedition. Meanwhile, in the city of Mede in Peloponnese, a colony of the Etruscans revolted and was received without scruples by Bratius, in spite of having eventually come over during the armistice, on account of certain infringement of the truce being alleged by him according to the against the Athenians. The audacity of Mede was partly caused by seeing Brasidas so active in the matter, and by the conclusions that they drew from his refusal to betray Cyane. Cyane. Besides, the conspirators in Mede were few and had carried on their practices too long not to fear detection for themselves, and had forced them all to go against their own inclinations. This news made the Athenians even more furious than ever, and they at once prepared an expedition against both cities. Expecting their arrival, Bratius conveyed the women and children of the Sicilians and Medians away to Ulanthus and Calais, and sent over to them 500 Peloponnesian hoplites and 300 Chalcidian Pelopites, all under the command of Polydamenes. Leaving these two cities to prepare against the speedy arrival of the Athenians, Brasidas and the this is now this is at 124, 124. Brasidas and Percidius started on a second joint expedition into Lysitantes against Arhabicus, the latter with the forces of his Macedonian subjects and the corps of hoplites composed of Hellenes dwelling in his country, the former with the Peloponnesians who he had with him in the Caledonians and the Acadians, and the rest in such a force which could muster. In all, these were about 3,000 Hellenistic hoplites, accompanied by the Macedonian cavalry, together with the Caledonians, almost 1,000 strong, besides an immense crowd of barbarians. On entering the country of Archibus, they found the Lycentians encamped and waiting for them, and themselves took up a position opposite. The infantry on either side of the hill, with plain between them, into which the horse of both armies first galloped down and engaged in cavalry action. After this, the Lycinians hoplites advanced from the hill and joined their cavalry and offered battle, upon which Bratius and Percidius also came down to meet them, and engaged and routed them with heavy loss. The survivors taking refuge on the hill in the heights, and there remaining inactive. The victors now set up a trophy and waited 2 or 3 days for the Illyrian mercenaries who were to join Perdiccas. Perdiccas then wished to go on and attack the villages of Acaros and to set still no longer. But Brasius, far from seconding this wish, refused it. He was anxious to return, seeing that the Illyrians did not appear, and fearing that the Athenians might sail up during the absence and attack Mendi. While they were thus disputing, the news arrived from the Illyrians had actually betrayed Picadius and joined the Arquebus, and the fear inspired by their warlike character made both parties now think the best to withdraw. However, owing to the dispute, nothing had been settled as to when they should start, and night came on. The Macedonians and the barbarians crowd suddenly took fright in one of those mysterious panics to which great armies are liable, and persuaded that an army might many times more numerous than theirs had really arrived was advancing, and all but upon them suddenly broke and fled in the direction of home. This compelled Perdiccas, who had first not perceived what had occurred, to depart without seeing Brachus, and the two armies camped at a considerable distance from each other. On daybreak, Bradius, seeing that the Macedonians had gone on, and that the Laerians and the Arquebusians were at the point of attacking him, formed his hoplites into a square with the light troops in the center and prepared to retreat. Posting his younger soldiers to the dash out wherever the enemy should attack them. He himself, with 300 picked men in the rear, intended to face about the same during the retreat and beat off the most forward of their assailants. Meanwhile, before the enemy approached, he sought to sustain the courage his soldiers with his hasty exhortation. Peloponnesian, I did not suspect you of being dismayed at being left alone, sustained an attack of a numerous and barbarian enemy. I should just have said a few words to you as usual without further explanation. As it is, in face of the desertion of our friends and the number of the enemies, I have some advice and information to offer, which, brief it must be, will I hope suffice for the most important points. The bravery that you habitually display in war does not depend on you having allies at your side in this or that encounter, but on your native courage. Not have numbers any nor have numbers any terrors for citizens of cities like yours, in which many do not rule, but the many do not rule the few, but rather the few the many, owing their position to nothing else than to the superiority in the field. Inexperience now makes you afraid of barbarians, and yet the trial of strength which you had with the Macedonians among them, in my own judgment, confirmed what I heard from others, should be enough to satisfy you that they will not prove formidable. Where an enemy seems strong but was really weak, a true knowledge of facts makes his adversary the bolder, just as a serious antagonist is encountered more confidently by those who do not know him. Thus, the present enemy might terrify an inexperienced imagination. They are formidable in outward look, but their yelling and is unbearable, and their brandishing of the weapons in the air has the threatening appearance. But when it comes to real fighting with an opponent who stands his ground, they're not what they seem. They have no regular order that they should be ashamed of deserting their positions when hard pressed. Fight and attack are equally honorable to them and afford no test of courage. Their independent mode of fighting never leaves anyone who wants to run away without a fair excuse of doing so. In short, they think frightening you at a distance is sure game than meeting you hand to hand. Otherwise, they would have done the one and not the other. You can thus plainly see that the terrors which they were at first invested are in fact trifling enough. Although to the eye and the ear, very prominent. Stand your ground, therefore, when they advance, and wait your opportunity to restore good order, and you will reach a place of safety all the sooner. Thus, you will know after their rabble, such as these, to those who sustain their first attack, but do not show their courage by threats of the terrible things that they are going to do at a distance, but with those who give way to them are quick enough to display their heroism in pursuit when they can do so without danger. Okay, so he's just accusing, he's breaking down the enemies, the barbarians' thing, saying that their appearance is more dangerous than their reality. That they're just undisciplined in character, and these things against the Spartans who have discipline and character in the fight will most likely overcome them. So this whole thing, we're going to retreat, we're going backwards. Don't worry about this. With the belief, with this brief address, Brasius began to lead uh, off his army. Seeing this, the barbarians came on with much shouting and hubtub, thinking that he was flying when they would overtake and cut him off. But whenever they charged, they found the young man ready to dash out against them. Where Brasius had, while Brasius with his pick company sustained their onset. Thus, the Peloponnesians withstood the first attack, to the surprise of the enemy, and afterwards relieved and repulsed them as fast as they came on, retiring as soon as their opponent became quiet. The main body of the barbarians ceased therefore to molest the Hellenes with barriers in the open country, leaving behind a certain number to harass their march. The rest went on to the fleeing Macedonians, slaying those whom they came upon, and so arrived in time to occupy the narrow pass between the hills within the country of Archobus. They knew that this was the only way which Brasius could retreat, and now proceeded to surround him just as he entered the most difficult part of the road in order to cut him off. Brasius, perceiving their intentions, told his 300 to hold on without order, as each as he could, and to the hill which seemed easiest to take, and to try to dislodge the barbarians already there before they should be joined by the main body closing around him. These attacked and overpowered the party on the hill, and the main army in the Hellenes now advanced with less difficulty towards it. The barbarians, being terrified at seeing their own men on that side driven from the height, no longer following the main body, considered whom they considered had gained the frontier and made good their escape. The height once gained, now Brasidas more securely, and the same day arrived Anasius, the first city in the dominions of Perdiccas. The soldiers engaged at the desertion of the Macedonians. Enraged at the desertion of the Macedonians, vented their rage on all the yokes of oxen which they found on the road, and any baggage which they tumbled off, as might easily happen in the panic of such a retreat, by unyoking and cutting down the cattle and taking the baggage for themselves. And from this moment, Perdiccas began to regard Brasidas as an enemy, and to feel against the Peloponnesians a hatred which he could not suit well the adversity, which could not suit well the adversity of the Athenians, the adversary of the Athenians. Indeed, he now departed from his natural interest, and made his endeavor to come to terms with the latter and get rid of the former. On his return to Macedonia in Teron, Brasidas found that the Athenians were ahead, already masters of Mendi, and remained quiet where he was, thinking that it was now out of his power to cross over into Pallene and assist the Mendanos. He kept good watch over Tyrone for about the same time as his campaign in Lysistrus, and the Athenians sailed upon the expedition which we left them preparing against the Mede and Saracen with 50 ships, 10 of which were Planian and 1,000 Athenian hoplites and 600 archers and 100 Thracians mercenaries and some Peloris drawn from their allies in the neighboring under the command of Nicias, son of Nicostratus, and Nicostratus, son of uh, uh, Diapetes. Departing from Apatida, the fleet came to land opposite the temple of Poseidon and proceeding against Mendi. They were there. They found the men of the city reinforced by 300 Simonians with their Peloponnesian auxiliaries, 700 hoplites in all under Polydamas encamped upon the hill outside the city. These Nicias with 120 lightly armed Macedonians, 60 picked men from the Athenian hoplites, and all the archers tried to reach a path running up the hill, but he received a wound and found himself unable to force the position. Nicostratus, meanwhile, with all the rest of the army, advanced the hill, which was naturally difficult, by a different approach further off. His troops were thrown into utter disorder, while the whole Athenian army narrowly escaped being defeated. For that day, the Medians and their allies showed no sign of yielding, and the Athenians retreated and encamped, and Median at nightfall returned into the city. The next day, the Athenians sailed round to the Sicilian side and took the suburb there, and all day plundered the country, without anyone coming out against them, partly because intestine disturbances in the city, and the following night, and 300 Sicilians returned home. On the morrow, Nicias advanced with half the army to the former frontier of Siones and laid waste to the country, while Nicostratus and the remainder stationed themselves before the city near the upper gates on the road to Patadia. Now, the arms of Mendana and their Peloponnesian auxiliaries within the wall happened to be piled in that quarter, where Polydamas accordingly began to draw them up for battle, encouraging the Medians to make a sortie. At that moment, one of the popular party answered him rebelliously that they would not go out and did not want a war, and thus answering was dragged by the arms and knocked about by Polydamas. Upon the popular party at once seized their arms and rushed at the Peloponnesians and their allies of the opposite faction. The troops were thus assaulted were at once routed, partly from the suddenness of the conflict and partly through fear of the gates being opened to the Athenians, with whom they imagined the attack had been planned. As many as were not killed on the spot took refuge in the citadel. Had at first they at first held from the first, and the whole Athenian army, and the first whole Athenian army. Nicias, having by this time returned and being close to the city, now burst into Mende, which had opened its gates without any agreed terms, and sacked it just as he had taken it by storm. And the generals, even finding some difficulty in restraining them from massacring the inhabitants. Thus the Athenians told the Medians that they might retain their civil rights, and themselves judge the supposed authors of the revolt, and cut off the party by the citadel, built a wall down to the sea and either side, appointing troops, maintained the blockade. Having first secured Mendi, they proceeded against Sion. The Sicilians and Peloponnesians marched out against them, occupying the strong hill in the front of the city, which had been captured by the enemy before they could invest the place. The Athenians stormed the hill, defeated and dislodged the occupants, and having encamped and set up a trophy, prepared for the work of circumvallation, validation. What's going around the army, going around the whole thing. Not long after they had begun this operation, auxiliaries besieged the citadel of Mende, forced the guard by the sea, and arrived by night at Sion, and to what was most succeeding them in entering passing through the besieging army. While the investment of Senes was in progress, Picadius sent a herald to the Athenian general and made peace with the Athenians, although through the spite against Bratius for the retreat from the Leontitis, from which the moment he had begun to negotiate. The Spartans, Ithogatius, who had just then upon the point of starting with an army overland to join Brasius, and Picadius now required by Nicias to give some proof of his sincerity for his reconciliation to the Athenians, and being himself no longer disposed to let the Peloponnesians into his country, put in motion his friends in Thessaly. With those chief men, he took away care to have relations, and effectually stopped the army in preparation that they did not even try the Thessalians. Ishagoras himself, however, with Amasius and Aretus, succeeded in reaching Brasius. They had been commissioned by the Spartans to inspect the state of affairs, and in breach of the law brought out from Sparta some of their young men to put in command of the cities, to prevent them being entrusted to the persons on the spot. Brasidas, according to Charidides, son of Amphipolis, and Presidius, son of Heligander in Torin. At the summer, at the same summer, the Thessians dismantled the walls of the Thespians on the charge of Atticism, having always wished to do so, and now finding in an easy manner in the flower of as the flower of the Thespian youth had perished in a battle with the Athenians. In the same manner, the temple of Hera at Argos was burnt down, and Cressius, the priestess, having placed the lighted torch near the garlands, and then falling asleep, so that all caught fire and were in blaze before she observed it. Chrysidas that very night fled to Pelos in fear of the Argives, who, following the law in such a case, appointed another priestess named Perinthus. Christus, at the time of her flight, had been priestess for 8 years of the present war, and half in the ninth. At the close of the summer, the siege worked around the Sicilian were complete, and the Athenians, leaving a detachment to maintain the blockade, returned with the rest of their army. So this is where we leave at 132. We'll stop right here at 133, sorry, the end of the summer. So again, this is the war. A truce was agreed to for a year because of the captured troops at Piqui and all the way back there the previous summer. There's a significant number of Spartan troops now held prisoner in Athens. The Spartans want them back, and they want to basically make a peace truce. We're here to negotiate about this. But the Brasius' occupation of that led to the breach of the truce by capturing these two cities in a revolt that revolted after the truce. The Spartans also then broke it kind of like this. So the spring is kind of a truce was made, but then the Spartans under Brasius acting encouraged the rebellion, seized the two cities, but the rebellion happened after the thing, so that the city should return to Athens. The argument went, but Brasius did not comply. The Spartans did not comply. So here, clearly, the Spartans seem to be breaking the treaty in a sense. In other words, the Spartans, you can't trust them. The idea that you can trust their word. And another thing about this is, notice when the Spartans do come, they put people they're going to put in charge of them. So much for the Brasius's word that they're going to be their retain of self-control. But now what's happening is that we get the thing that all of a sudden this is like in chapter 132. In other words, the Spartans brought some people in against the treaty, who these people are now going to be put in charge. These people are going to be now put in charge now of of the cities that kind of revolted. So to what extent is they really under their own control? Okay. So here we end. If you have any questions or comments, please put this forward. I know my throat is going. Um, um, if you have any comments, put them down below. Like it, share with friends, subscribe if you want to see more. Um, if you want to hear some more things, put some comments down there, and we'll do it. Questions, even I'll try to answer them. Um, and if you want to subscribe, I said do that. You can follow me on social media. Information below. If you want to help contribute to keep this going and things like this, you can just means subscribe star below or Patreon now. Um, um, Again, thank you and have a nice day.